Queensland is certainly warm for autumn. Is it usually this warm? No, it was only 3 weeks ago I was with my daughter in Wisconsin, and there was 18 inches of snow, and she said usually there's green grass and daffodils by now. We find that if she's incredibly cold, we're incredibly hot, and when she's incredibly hot, we're incredibly cold. So just adjusting our new sound system. I might put that out a bit because it's making a bit of a funny sound there. Tonight's lecture is on exercise, and I'm sure we've all heard lots of lectures about exercise. I'm sure we've all heard that exercise is very important, and it's often, with most of us, as one man said to me, I know you're not going to like it, Barbara, but I do not have 1 hour to do a 5-hour jog every day. You know, after hearing this lecture, he realised you don't need an hour. I don't know about you, but I haven't got an hour. But I've got 15 minutes. Have you got 15 minutes? Yeah. How many hours in a day? 24 hours in a day. God designed that this living machinery be in daily activity, and in that activity is its preserving power. Now, what's a preservative? It's something that stops you going bad or off, is that right? That's what exercise does. But there's exercise and there's exercise. And the exercise that they're finding today is the most powerful, is the high intensity interval training. Have you heard of it? So let's have a look at what high intensity interval training is. As the name implies, this is intervals of high intensity. So what's high intensity? High intensity is anything that gets the heart rate up and gets your breathing increased to quite a rate. So that could be running very fast, running up a hill, or if it's very steep, even walking up a hill will do it. It might be swimming very fast. It could be push-ups. But most of the research has been done on exercise bikes. A lot of people, especially those in the latter years, find the exercise bike best because they're holding on. They're holding on, which means it's very stable and they're not going to tip or fall because they're holding on, and they can go very, very fast and then slow down a little bit. So, as the name implies, the high intensity interval training is intervals of very, very fast, that's high intensity, and recovery. So what's recovery? Well, recovery can be anything that slows you down. So when Michael and I do our morning exercise, we run up the hills and we just walk slowly down the hills. That's recovery. If you're cycling, it might be cycling downhill. You're almost not cycling, are you? You're just going very, very slow. The research shows that the best recovery time is not when you've just stopped, but when you're actually doing something very slowly. So if you're worn out after your high intensity, it might be just standing still and just moving your top part of your body, or it might be where you do your stretches and go down and stretch the muscles in your legs, but it's actually light movement. So that's why if you're a runner, it's walking slowly down hills. If you're on the exercise bike, it's just slowly doing the bicycle. And it's usually done for a cycle. Now, the research on this shows that the most powerful is 30 seconds. You might say, well, that's not very long. Try it. Try it when you're running for your life. This is high intensity. A red-bellied black snake's chasing you, or maybe that's more applicable than a tiger's chasing you. But you're running for your life. Now, when I read of this, and I began to implement it in my diet, because in my lifestyle, because when I read of this, I read of it in a book called Body by Science by Dr. Doug McCuff, and he began to get his cardiac patients to do it to help with their heart issues. And it's so impressive. He basically says in the book, when you start doing this, we're not going to be able to hold you down. You're going to have so much energy. It's very impressive. So I began to do it. And I was running up hills. When I counted to 20 seconds high intensity, basically my body said, that's enough. When I got to 25 seconds high intensity, my body said, this is ridiculous. When I get to 30 seconds high intensity, I feel like I'm dying. In fact, if I didn't count, I wouldn't get to 30. Because I'd think, no, that's enough, that's enough. And I think we all know counting seconds, it's 1 and 2 and I get to know how many steps are in a second. And then I would do recovery. Now, how long's recovery? Recovery basically is dependent on how fit you are. So most of the research shows 90 seconds, so that's a minute and a half. Your fitness is not determined by how hard and fast you can go, but how long you take to recover. That's why it's good to document your case. And by the way, I believe everyone should be their own doctor, because only you know how you feel, only you know what you've been through, and only you know how your body responds or reacts to different things. And part of being your own doctor is documenting your case. I don't believe it needs to be a complicated documentation. It can be quite simple. Otherwise we probably wouldn't do it. Just jot down very quickly in the areas where you want change or you're implementing change, and you would be surprised that after a couple of months, what you notice in your improvement. But if you weren't documenting it, you might not even notice the improvement that has happened. So start to document your recovery time. Dr. Al Sears, in his book PACE, PACE means progressive acceleration of cardiopulmonary exertion. I'll go through that in more detail in a minute. So Dr. Al Sears, in his book PACE, he acknowledges the value of the high intensity interval training. And he quotes a lady who did 7 seconds high intensity and she needed 15 minutes to recover. I tell you that story because not many people are quite that unfit. So if you do 10 seconds high intensity and need 10 minutes to recover, well, you're not as bad as that lady, hey? So, now, his book is Progressive Acceleration. Progressive meaning this will not stay like that. You find that the fitter you get, the less your recovery time will be. And he advocates a cycle of 6. Have you done the maths on that? It's not very long, is it? It's not very long at all. In fact, if your recovery time can be kept to 90 seconds, or maybe even a minute, it can be brought down even shorter. It's a tight little chunk in the day. This is no gentle stroll. This is hard work. One lady said to me, but I like my morning walk. I said, well, keep up your morning walk amongst the gum trees, listening to the birds. And when you come home, get on your exercise bike and do your high intensity interval training. But you've got to find a little spot in a day. The beauty of doing it in the morning is that you will reap the benefits all day long. You reap the benefits physically, you reap the benefits spiritually, you reap the benefits emotionally, you reap the benefits mentally. Dr. Neil Nedley, he wrote a book, his American doctor, called Depression, A Way Out. And when he gets a very depressed, bipolar, schizophrenic patient, he puts them on 7 hours of exercise a day. Well, he finds after 7 days they are so improved they can go to a 1 hour a day maintenance dose or 15 minutes high intensity interval training. That's cheap medicine, isn't it? One man said, 7 hours a day for 7 days, what's your health worth? Huh? Did you know that the word bipolar was not known 100 years ago? And you know, there's someone making a lot of money out of mental illness. Have you ever thought about that? Now, I admit and agree that in a crisis, a drug may save a life, but it should have no place in day-to-day life of the average person. And if the drug does save a life, every good doctor will then work towards getting the person off that medication as soon as possible. It was just for the crisis. The crisis has passed. Now there's no need. There's no need. Yes, there's a fire, so 10 fire trucks come. But the fire's passed. And you'd be scratching your head if the 10 fire trucks were still there. Is that right? Yes, there are some things that are done in a crisis, but not on day to day. What I'd like to do now is I want to go inside the cell. Because when you go inside the cell and see what this does inside the cell, it becomes even more powerful. I call the inside workings of the cell the central business district of the human body. To understand how the body heals, we need to know how it works. And to know how it works, we have to go to the CBD, Central Business District of the human body. You see, we are made up of 100 trillion cells. And the inside workings of every cell, even though the cells all differ in many ways, the inside workings of the cell are the same. The only cell that is not the same is the red blood cell, because the red blood cell is just the carrier, carrying oxygen, carrying nutrition, carrying water to the inside workings of the cell. Here is our cell. And the glucose goes in. And the glucose goes in under the action of insulin. You see, insulin is the key that unlocks the door to get the glucose inside the cell. Now, when the glucose gets inside the cell, it goes through a 20-step pathway. This 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. Isn't that why we eat? We eat so that every single cell is getting some fuel, so our eyes see, so our ears hear, so our brain functions, so our pancreas functions. And I think I showed you yesterday, I did, when I looked at the breakdown of carbohydrates. First of all, it's sent to the cell. Here it is here, what we're looking at. And then if you've still got some left over, it's actually stored as glycogen. And then if there's still some left over, it's stored as fat. Remember we looked at that last night? That's why we eat. Okay, let's go back to see what's happening with the glucose. The glucose goes in, it goes through a 20-step pathway that gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into what's called the powerhouse. Called the powerhouse because even though it's only an 8-step pathway, it delivers to us a whopping 36 units of energy. So why is there such a difference? Why does a 20-step pathway only give us 2 units of energy, and why does an 8-step pathway give us 36? It's oxygen. Oxygen makes the difference. There's no oxygen in this pathway. How are you going to feel if every single one of your 100 trillion cells has enough oxygen to get down to the 8-step pathway? How are you going to feel? We're not going to be able to hold you down. Can you see that? What a difference oxygen makes. And the most powerful way to oxygenate your body is exercise. And if someone's got chronic fatigue syndrome and you ask them if they exercise, what will they say to you? You don't understand. I don't have the energy. Well, guess how you get it? Now, someone with chronic fatigue syndrome, they might only be able to do 2 cycles at first. And those 2 cycles might only be 15 seconds. That's where you start. You just start where you are, and the more you do it, the better you get at it, the more oxygen you will receive, which means more oxygen's getting down to there, and look at the energy you will receive. Now, to make this a little bit easy to understand, let me break down the pathways. This is the 20-step pathway. The glucose goes in. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 chemical reactions. Because there's no oxygen, so that's basically called the anaerobic pathway. Twice, because of the process of fermentation, energy is given off. Now, out of that comes the chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate gets fed into the 8-step pathway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, because of the presence of oxygen, every pathway is giving off 3, sometimes 4, energy, 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 energy. Whoa! That's impressive, isn't it? I'm looking for a rubber. Can we get... So if you wake up in the morning feeling a little tired, what's the best thing you can do? Well, the first thing you do is drink a glass of water, because you're not going to be able to exercise very well unless you have fluid. You see that? Now when we eat, thank you very much, when we eat, our food breaks down to glucose, most of our food. And then it goes to the liver, and the liver sends it through the pathway. But we still have some glucose left over, and so now it's stored as glycogen. And glycogen is a name given to quick release stores. It looks like a little bunch of grapes, but they're actually little molecules of glucose. So we'll put it down here. First place it goes, the glucose, to the cell. Second place it goes is as glycogen. And as I showed you last night, on the high carbohydrate diet a lot of people are having, you've still got glucose left over, and so now it is stored in the fat cells. And on the high carbohydrate diet, what's happening to Aussies today? They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And as I showed you last night, fat doesn't make you fat. What makes you fat? These carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not bad. What a relief. Because don't we like them? It's only when they're overdone and refined. Got that? My husband would never forgive me if the potatoes stopped coming. So the third place that the liver sends this glucose is as fat. Now I wanted to set up those pathways to show you what's happening in exercise. So when we go start our high intensity exercise program, 20-step pathway speeds up, no wonder. 8-step pathway speeds up, no wonder. But this 20-step pathway is very fast. It's a very fast pathway, and the 20-step pathway is fast. The 8-step pathway is slow. We're going to retire that one because it's not very strong. So the 20-step pathway is a very fast pathway. The 8-step pathway is very slow. So when we start doing the high intensity, 20-step speeds up, 8-step speeds up. But there's a rate-setting enzyme there that will always keep this one faster and this one slower. So when you're running or cycling or swimming or push-ups, you're starting to make more pyruvate than can be fed into the 8-step. And so now your body stores it on the side as lactic acid. Have you heard of lactic acid? We've all heard of lactic acid. Now I think the most exciting part about the high intensity exercise program is what I'm about to tell you. When you're in recovery time, what's recovery time? maybe just stretching on the side, getting your breath back, slowly walking down the hill, slowly cycling. When you're in recovery time, your liver converts that lactic acid back to pyruvate, feeds it into the powerhouse. So when you're in recovery time, you're burning just as much fuel as when you're running for your life. Wow. So when you stop to look at the view on your mountain climb, and people think it's an excuse because you can't go any further, it's actually important. Because in recovery time, you are mopping up your lactic acid. What happens to the person that has the 5K jog? What happens to his lactic acid? It stays there. When you do your high intensity exercise program, I know most people are walking to the exercise bike. Michael and I would walk for probably about a good 5 minutes before we start to do our run. You can't jump out of bed and then go straight into high intensity exercise program. There's got to be a little bit of warming up first. So when you talk about warming up, I think most people realise that. You don't jump out of bed and run up the hill very fast. There's a little bit of warming up. Your muscles protest if you do that. You've got to ease them into the shock. Shock. That reminds me of something. And I'll be talking about this on Saturday morning when I talk about the brain. In 1998, a group of scientists discovered brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And brain-derived neurotrophic factor is a protein that stimulates neurogenesis. Neurogenesis. Do you know what neurogenesis means? New brain cells. How exciting is that? Because when the brain cell dies, it's gone. It does not regrow. And that's always been known. But in 1998, scientists discovered that there's a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor that stimulates new brain cells. And it is stimulated by high-intensity exercise program. This is getting better all the time, isn't it? I told you I had something exciting for you tonight. And remember what I said last night, the human body will deteriorate, but the brain should never deteriorate. In fact, if any of us have been through things that have caused some of our brain cells to die, if you do this interval training, it stimulates the protein, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, so new brain cells. This explains why Dr. Neil Nedley's advice to his very depressed bipolar people is to do 7 hours of exercise a day. Now, this isn't 7 hours of high-intensity interval training. This is little, you know, and when you're doing 7 hours of exercise a day, you come to a hill now and then, don't you? So there's a little bit of high intensity going up there. So we're coming to the end of our first set of high intensity interval training. 20 steps speeds up, 8 steps speeds up, we're in recovery time, and the liver converts the lactic acid back to pyruvate, so we're still burning just as much fuel. And then we go to our second set of high intensity interval training. We're running out of fuel. And so now the body plucks these little molecules of glucose and feeds them down into the energy cycle. Plucks them, feeds them down. Plucks them, feeds them down. These are in the muscle cell. And when they're in the muscle cell, it's like they're in a prison. They can only be used by the muscle cell. The liver has some too, and that can be sent all over the body. But these glycogen cells, or glycogen stores I should say, quick release glucose stores, they're already in your muscle cell, just ready to be released when you're doing your high intensity interval training. Now we're getting to our third set of high intensity interval training, and we're running out of glycogen stores. We're running out of fuel. What are we going to do now? So now the brain causes the pituitary gland to release the human growth hormone. The human growth hormone is often called youth hormone. You see, when we're growing, our human growth hormone is active. I stopped growing at 16, that probably doesn't surprise you. My son William, you met him last night, he grew 2 inches from 21 to 23. Boys can still be growing, boys like to hear that. But when we stop growing, our human growth hormone goes into retirement, only to be called on when necessary. So let's get back to our third set of high intensity interval training. We're running out of fuel. Our glycogen stores have all been plucked, so the brain causes the human growth hormone to be released, and it activates hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase is an enzyme that breaks down fat. Last night we looked at sublingual lipase underneath the tongue. It breaks down saturated fats. We looked at pancreatic lipase that breaks down your long-chain fatty acids. So what fat does this break down? Good news, students. Your fat stores. Hormone-sensitive lipase is an enzyme that starts breaking down your fat stores, because remember, we're running out of fuel. And you know what fat is? It's the most amazing fuel depot that we have in our body. That's what it is. The human growth hormone causes the bodies to start burning fat as fuel. It becomes a fat burner. So basically, when you don't do high intensity interval training, you're putting your body into a bit of a crisis. And we've already looked at the fact that brain-derived neurotrophic factors release new brain cells. The reason why the body becomes a fat burner is because glucose burns at 4 calories per gram, whereas fat, it burns at 9 calories per gram. Now, every weight loss book has that information in psychedelic colours as the reason why if you want to lose weight, you've got to stop the fat. But they don't understand what a calorie is. A calorie is a unit of energy. So if you want a high energy food, what do you eat? Fat. Remember, fat doesn't make you fat. No wonder the body starts burning fat as fuel. Do you know Dr. Atkins? We've probably all heard of that famous doctor. He threw calorie counting to the wind. He proved that you're barking up the wrong tree. You see, you can have a 2,500 calorie a day diet that's all carbohydrates and you can put on weight. You can have a 2,500 calorie a day diet that is high in fibre, generous amounts of protein and healthy fats, and you can actually lose weight. I mentioned last night the ketogenic diet, how the fat is used by the brain to heal brain cells. Yeah, these 1,700 cases of Alzheimer's that's being diagnosed every week in Australia, is that because Aussies have stopped fat? Well, that's one reason. And the cholesterol-lowering medication whose side effect is Alzheimer's, dementia, memory loss, muscle wasting. It's scary, isn't it? So we're looking at what happens when you're running out of fuel. All our glycogen stores have been plucked. And so now the brain causes a release of the human growth hormone from the pituitary gland. And the human growth hormone it activates hormone-sensitive lipase to start breaking down our fat stores. it causes the body to start burning fat as fuel, because that fat's going to give more than twice the units of energy, because we're running. The human growth hormone increases the body's ability to utilize protein. Protein is an essential nutrient. You see, 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is protein. That's pretty essential. On Tuesday night we looked at the DNA. The DNA crossword bands is made up of amino acids, which is a breakdown from the protein we eat. The new cell is built up with amino acids, breakdown from the protein we eat. 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is protein. That's pretty important. So we need to be eating sufficient protein. Every meal should have some sort of protein. So where do we get our protein from? As a vegetarian, my protein comes from legumes, nuts and seeds. You can overdo the nuts. Remember what I said last night? A handful every meal. My 6'6" brother-in-law can fit more nuts in his fist than me. Well, he needs more than me. So the fist is a good sign. Legumes, I eat legumes every single day. I didn't know what a legume was till I was about 20. I'm a 5th generation Scottish descent. I grew up on sausages or chops, mashed potatoes, frozen peas or beans every night of the week, except for Sunday, then we'd have roast lamb. That's how I grew up. My husband and I went to Scotland last year, and everywhere we went, everyone eats the way I ate when I was growing up. We'd go into English pubs. We'd heard that was the best place to eat. And you know, lots of vegetables. My husband was over the moon. You could have baked potatoes or mashed potatoes. Lots of potatoes. And then I discovered legumes. In the back of my book, I have some recipes, and the only recipes that are in my book are recipes for legumes, because I find most people really don't know what to do with legumes. So we should be eating legumes every day. Sometimes I eat them every meal. Excellent form of protein. So the essentials are fibre, lots of vegetables, protein, your legumes, your nuts, your seeds, and fats are also an essential nutrient. And 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is fat. That makes it essential. But the membrane around the brain cells is not 50% fat, that's 70% fat. Do you know the fattiest organ in the body is the brain? And the brain loves fat. It can't function without it. Interesting. So the human growth hormone increases the body's ability to utilize protein. We need to be eating sufficient protein. We need to be not drinking with our meals, because as you'll see on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock when I take you on a journey through your gut, when we drink with our meals, we water down our hydrochloric acid and it can't break down the protein. So we need to be eating sufficient protein. We should be drinking, I should say, between our meals. Stop drinking half an hour before the meal and start drinking about an hour and a half after the meal. That'll allow your hydrochloric acid to stay strong, to break down your protein. Now here's another aspect. When you do the high intensity interval training, causing a release of your human growth hormone, it increases your body's ability to utilize that protein. The last one is the human growth hormone increases the circulation of the blood to the skin. And when you increase the circulation of the blood to the skin, you slow down aging. Now the movie stars pay $1,000 a week for the human growth hormone, because what the human growth hormone does is it keeps them young. Because it gives them all that. Well, I'm offering it to you cut price today, cut price students. 15 minutes of high intensity interval training a day will cause a release of the human growth hormone, and it will remain active for 24 hours. I told you I was giving you a bargain. You know, this form of exercise is the best insurance policy that you can make, because the dividends you receive far outweigh the energy you expend. It's actually ridiculous when you look at how much energy you put into this and consider the benefits that you will receive. And that's why I choose to do it every single day. Because it's such a small little nugget of the day. I find that I have to make an appointment with myself. I make an appointment with myself and then I'll do it. In fact, my appointment is at 6 o'clock every day. 6 o'clock, an alarm bell goes off. I usually wake at 5 and usually do my high intensity at 6. Now you might not have this, but I have a wonderful creek. So when I've done my high intensity interval training, I'm very, very hot, and then I can dive in the creek. Even in the winter, yes. My little down jacket helps because I get very, very hot. And in the winter, I'm in the creek 7 seconds, but in the summer, I might be in the creek for about 5 minutes. And if we've had a bit of rain and the water's up a bit, I might do another high intensity by swimming against the flow of the river. It is the most powerful form of exercise that there is, because of the effect that it has on the human body, as I have shown you. Now, we had a man attend one of our programs, and he was very, very fit for a man in his early 60s. And every lecture, he would be smiling and nodding. So with his smiling and his nodding, I realised that I was hitting the nail on the head, so to speak, for this guy. After a couple of days, he said to me, "I've got a story for you, Barbara." He said, 2 years ago, he said, I was obese. I said, "Really? What happened?" Because he certainly wasn't obese now. He said, "I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you've got to lose weight. Your blood pressure's going too high, your blood cholesterol's going too high, your blood's getting too thick, your blood sugars are getting too high. I'm going to have to put you on medication unless you lose weight." He said, "Let me try losing weight." So the doctor told him to go on a fat and free diet. You've heard this story? He said, "I wasn't eating much fat, so I went on a fat-free diet." He said, "I went back to the doctor after 2 months and I'd lost 1 kilo. What does that mean when you're 150 kilos? Not much. Not much. Doctor said, "Nah, I'm going to have to put you on medication. I don't like what's happening." His name was Lee. He said, Lee said, "Let me try a few things." He said, "I'm a businessman." He said, "I've been a very successful businessman. At 62, he said, I'm retired." And I looked out there and he was driving his little Mercedes Sport, so he must have been a very successful businessman. And he said, "In business, if it doesn't work, you don't keep doing it." Isn't that the definition of insanity? So he Google searched. And he came up with the FODMAP diet, the paleo diet, the Atkins diet, the beach diet, the zone diet, Bruce Fife's diets. Do you know, they're all saying the same thing. They're saying the fat's not the problem. It's the carbohydrates that are the problem. So he thought, well, these are all doctors, all got decades of clinical practice up their sleeve. I've got nothing to lose. Everything else I've tried isn't working. I'm going to give it a go. So he stopped all carbohydrates. What did he eat? A lot of vegetables. He ate meat. And he ate meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. He said, after about a month, I noticed my clothes were just about falling off me. He said, I was very busy at the time. But he said, and I hardly noticed it. He said, I was never hungry. You see, there are 3 foods that keep the food in the stomach longer. Fibre, because it slowly releases the glucose. Protein, because it's in the stomach that protein's broken down. And fat, because it coats the food and takes a little bit longer. So he was never hungry. And you'll see on Saturday morning, digestion takes about 3.5 to 4 hours, so we should be leaving about a 5 hour between meals. He said, I was never hungry. the food I was enjoying the food. I was eating everything I can't usually eat. And he said, I had lots of energy. You see, if you don't supply the body with this quick glucose, your liver can convert protein and fat to glucose, and your liver can convert your fat stores to glucose. So he said, I was never hungry, lots of energy, weight just falling off me. He said, I was excited. He was also exercising. He'd heard about the high-intensity interval training, so he was doing that every day. He said, because of the size I was doing it on the exercise bike, because he said, when you're that big, it's a scary thing, the thought of falling. In fact, when you're that big, you can hardly even get up again. And when you're that heavy, he said, and you fall, you can do some serious damage. So he stuck to the exercise bike. He said, I went to the doctor 2 months later, and he'd lost, I think it was 15 kilo in 2 months. The doctor said, whoa, you're looking good. Blood pressure down, blood cholesterol down. Did everyone hear that? Meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs, and the cholesterol's down. Blood sugar down. That's not surprising because he was, having very low glucose. He said blood thinning was normal. Everything gone back to normal. Doctor said, keep on that low-fat diet, it's doing you well. He said, I decided not to say anything because I wanted to fully explore or fully play out my experiment. But he was happy. What's the old Aussie saying? If you're on a good thing, stick to it. The Bible says in 1 Thessalonians 5:18, no, it's 5:21, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. In other words, if it's working, do it. He went back to the doctor, I think it was 8 months later. By now he'd lost 60 kilos. Wow. Doc, he sat down and said, Doc, I got to tell you the truth. He said, I actually increased my fat. It was the carbs. The doctor was very interested. Unfortunately, doctors do not study nutrition. And actually, that's why Dr. Atkins got results. I bought his book because I had a few guests that said, you're not going to like it, Barbara, but I go well on the Atkins diet. I thought, I've got to listen to this. Doesn't the best health professional listen to you? Because you're living in that body. Do you know, it's one of the most fascinating books that I've read. And when Dr. Atkins was popular, I used to give a lecture called Dr. Atkins' Missing Link. And I believe Dr. Atkins' missing link was the vegetarian protein. The vegetarian protein in your nuts, your seeds, your legumes. So Lee was so excited to come to my lectures. Here he was now, 2 years later, very fit. I think he weighed about 85 kilo now. He was 5'8", so that's pretty good weight for his height. He said, I've got another story to tell you. He said, after I'd lost most of the weight, I had this big lump of tissue on my abdomen. He said, I looked at it and I thought to myself, if that's what I have to wear because of what I let my body get to, so be it. He said, I noticed, because I got pretty busy with life, he said, I got very busy with life because he said, I've got my mother out of aged care now. I've actually got her out of the wheelchair. He's having a bit of fun in his retirement. He said, I noticed, and it took me, I think, about 18 months, he said, but it's gone. It's gone. This big lump of tissue is gone. You see, when you're doing the high-intensity interval training, you're causing an increase of the circulation of the blood to the skin, and little by little by little, it pulls it in. Wow. We've got a book at our health centre called the Gabriel Method. It's by John Gabriel. And he was 183 kilo. He was just huge. He would have needed 2 of these chairs to sit in here. In fact, he couldn't have sat on one of those chairs. And it took him 2.5 years, and there are 4 photographs in the book. And the last photograph, he looks like he's got the body of a very fit 20-year-old man. He was in his 40s when he did this. Incredible. Now, he doesn't talk about the high-intensity interval training. He doesn't talk about the human growth hormone, but basically that's what he was doing. Because he said he'd be walking along and he'd trick his body into thinking a tiger was about to jump out of the bushes, and he'd jump down and do 30 push-ups. So he was actually doing the high-intensity interval training. And he did it over 2.5 years, so little by little that gave his body time for the tissues to actually pull in. We live in an amazing body, and muscle knows no age. Did you hear that? So whether you're 9 or 90, this is applicable. It's applicable for every single person. And I think it's a really scary thing that so many people in their latter years of life put their feet up and think, now it's time for me to have a rest. And you know what happens to those people? They actually deteriorate very, very quickly. Very quickly. And you would be shocked at the amount of women in their 50s, 60s and 70s who have uterine prolapses. You see, we're constantly fighting gravity. I'm fighting gravity by standing here. If I wasn't fighting gravity, I'd be lying on the floor. Is that right? Gravity's constantly pulling us down. And the only way to strengthen the human body is to defy gravity. And isn't that what babies do as soon as they're born? They're trying to put their head up. And then when they get a little bit older, they're trying to sit up. And then they get up on their hands and knees. And then they try and pull themselves up. And they start to walk. Just the act of lifting your leg with every step, you're defying gravity. You're strengthening. And then when the baby gets in the cot, what's the next thing they do? Jump! Defying gravity. What's the old saying? When you're happy, jump for joy. Jump for joy. And so these ladies that have prolapses, they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, there is an operation I can do to stitch that up. But then he discovers that the muscles are so weak, he can't. So what does he have to use? Mesh. So he puts mesh in there to try and hold it all in place. I had 2 ladies 3 months ago, both in their 50s, both had had the operation. Both times it failed. So if the operation fails, then the lady has this terrible discomfort of this prolapse, and eventually she goes and has an operation, and he takes her whole uterus out. Cuts the whole lot out. Is that the answer? What's the answer? Did you know there are 800 court cases in Australia in process at the moment suing because of what the mesh has done? The mesh has grown into other parts of the body. So what's the problem? Is the problem the mesh? No, the poor doctor, there's no muscle there. He has to use some. What's he going to do? So where's the problem? The problem's education. The problem is people do not know, they do not realise what they have to do to keep that body in good working order. And so what those ladies need to do is strengthen those muscles. So I'd like to take a moment now to show you the muscles that strengthen the pelvic girdle. Now, men and women alike have a pelvic girdle, and that pelvic girdle is like a network of muscles that starts at your belly button, goes between your legs, and ends up at your coccyx, your tailbone. And those muscles are all intertwined. So especially with a woman, when she has 3 openings in that area, that when her pelvic girdle's strong, it will hold it there. So how can a woman particularly, and it certainly helps men because they have things in that area too. How can we strengthen that pelvic girdle? It is by defying gravity, and it is by use. Now, one thing that people in Asian countries can do very easily is this, got that, up and down, up and down. My husband and I do 10 every single morning. I was put to shame recently when an 81-year-old lady visited me and told me she does 20. Now, when I was getting my husband to first do it, he was not happy. He was like, you know, like this. Now, he just goes up and down, up and down. Muscle knows no age. A muscle gets stronger with use. I'm not telling you anything new there, am I? He can squat with ease now. Now, that squatting strengthens that pelvic girdle. You've heard of Pilates exercises? The Pilates exercise is a group of exercise that strengthens the whole pelvic area. Did you know that you have your own natural girdle? It's called transverse abdominis. It starts at your it starts at your tailbone, connects with your hip and your rib, other hip and rib back to your coccyx bone, and that holds everything in place. Your abdominal muscles, your internal organs there. One lady said, well, my abs are long gone. I said, well, if they were long gone, you'd be standing like this. Because it's your abdominal muscles that are all connected to your spine via transverse abdominis. So they're there. And when your abdominal muscles are strong, do you know it pulls your spine straight? So your transverse abdominis is part of your pelvic girdle, even though it goes that way. So your Pilates classes, your squatting, and also the best way to sit on the throne, you know the throne that we sit on every morning to evacuate? Well, you can buy something called Squatty Potty, and it's like a stool that wraps around the toilet or around the throne. I've just come back from America, you're not allowed to say the word toilet. So it wraps around the throne. So when we sit to evacuate in the morning, our knees should be up. That strengthens the pelvic girdle, and it also prevents pressure on the anus. So it helps to prevent hemorrhoids and also heal from hemorrhoids. There is another exercise that is considered to be the most powerful exercise on planet Earth. And this exercise is particularly powerful to help with your pelvic girdle, and it's rebounding. Now, rebounding is like a little mini trampoline, and you can definitely do your high-intensity interval training on rebounding. You can jog on the rebounder. You can go very, very fast rebounding with that. Now, why is rebounding so powerful? Now, if a lady's just had a baby and she gets on a rebounder, guess what will happen? She'll have a little accident with her urinary system. So your rebounding is strengthening that urethral muscle. Now, the reason why rebounding is so powerful is because it uses every single cell in the body. I read a book on rebounding by Albert Carter. Albert Carter was a trampolinist, champion trampolinist, Olympian champion back in the 80s. He married, had 2 little children, and they used to do a trampolining show. And he wondered why his children were so strong. His little 4-year-old daughter, he would hold her legs and she would do 1-arm push-ups. And his little boy at the age of 7 would challenge other children to push-ups, and his little 7-year-old boy could do 1,000 push-ups without a break. And he used to wonder why his children were so strong. Now, I don't know whether he ever looked in the mirror, but he was, you know, he didn't have a 6-pack, he had about a 10-pack, if that's possible. He was built like this. He did not do weights. All he did was rebound. So he began to investigate. He thought, why is this so powerful? Do you know, as he investigated, he found it very difficult to get information on this until he came to NASA. Now, you know when the astronauts go to outer space, there's no gravity. And they found that when the astronauts came back from outer space, this is strong young men, they had lost 68% of their muscle power and their bones were deteriorating. So they had to find a form of exercise that tried to strengthen these young men to endure the lack of gravity. See, they deteriorate because there's no gravity, and the only way you can get strong is to defy gravity. And they found that the trampolining or rebounding also, their muscles and their bones recovered a lot quicker. So not only did the rebounding prepare them to endure the no gravity, but it also, they found recovery happened twice the rate recovery happened. They also found when they were rebounding, they were increasing their ability to withstand G-force, a higher G-force. And the reason for this is, it is defying gravity that builds strength. And when you're leaping up in the air, what are you defying? Gravity. The other force that comes into play is acceleration. So when you are leaping off the mat, you are accelerating up into the air, and then just as you get to the tip, another force comes in, and that's deceleration. And then you start going down. And as you go down, you are accelerating again. And then you hit the mat, and you're with deceleration. And then you bound up again, and you're back to acceleration. So he calls them the three teachers, or the three principles that come together to explain why this is such a powerful form of exercise. It's the most powerful form of exercise on planet Earth because of these three forces that come together on rebounding. Every single cell in the body works. You can just imagine every time you're going up and down. Now, if you can't jump, all you have to do is that. You just start by just slowly jigging, not even the feet leaving the mat. And you can get rebounders that have frames. So if you're a little bit unstable, you can do that. In fact, they reckon the best place to start is just pretend to walk like this, not even leaving. And then that's, I guess, you're warming up till you slowly can start to bound on the rebound. If you've got a rebounder in your house, where are the children?
Jumping.
They're jumping. They love to jump, don't they? I believe that people get old because they stop jumping. Okay, it's time to start jumping. I had a lady, what about skipping rope? When you got skipping rope, you've got jar with every step. Every time you hit that ground, you've got jarring. And Albert Carter, the book I first read was written in the 80s, and then I got a new book written in 2014. If you put Albert Carter in the web, you'll get some of his books. Very, very interesting. He had some people come to him who were runners in their 40s. Their pelvis, their lower back, their knees, their joints are suffering because of the constant jarring. So when you're skipping, when you're running, there's that constant jarring. So he got these runners who had all these problems onto rebounding. And within a matter of months, their problems had all resolved because there's no more jarring. You've got this bounce and this give. Very good for flat feet because you're bounding off your toes. And the best way to strengthen your arch is your toes. Because our foot was designed to toe strike. Have you noticed how children run? They never heel strike. They toe strike. And when people, runners, wear those big padded joggers, it encourages heel striking. Try running on the grass with your heel. Your body won't let you. You see, our toe was designed to cushion, like a shock absorber, the weight of our body coming down, but the heel does not. The heel does not. There's a book called Born to Run by Dr. I don't think he's a doctor, he's an investigator, Christopher McDougall. And he investigates the way to run. It's very interesting. And he looks historically at how people run. And he came across Abidi Bikila. I don't know if anyone remembers Abidi Bikila. He was a barefoot runner in the 1960 and 1964 Olympic Games. He took home gold for Africa. Abidi Bikila. He was a barefoot runner. I tell you, Nike and Reebok hate him. We should be running on our toes. When you run on your toes, and when you rebound, you always rebound on your toes. And when you rebound on your toes, it strengthens that arch, and that helps to heal from flat feet. People with varicose veins, it pumps the venous system. We have a pump called the heart that pumps blood away from the heart. So what pumps the blood back? You've got a second heart, and it's called the calf muscle. So when you rebound, it stimulates your second heart, and that's why it's a cure for varicose veins, is the rebounding. And remember, there's no jarring. A lot of people with varicose veins, they're on their feet for too long, they're on cement floors, there's a little bit of an inherited factor, and also constipation. But if you start to be drinking 8 glasses of water a day, and have a plant-based diet, high fibre, and have that squatty potty at your toilet and rebound, that certainly can resolve constipation. So rebounding. There's so much you can do on the rebound. So when I rebound, I twist as I jump, and I also do arm. So when you're jumping like this, you're strengthening bicep, and when you jump with I usually do 10 down and 10 up. When you jump with your arm up, you're strengthening your triceps. And you can also do ones up and down. If you get really good, you can sit on the rebounder and bounce on the rebounder like that. There's so much that you can do. Something else that the rebounder does, which no other exercise does, is it stimulates your lymphatic system. Now, your lymphatic system is called the body's vacuum cleaner. Your lymphatic system sweeps away waste from the tissues. And as you saw on Tuesday night, one of the main causes of disease is build-up of waste in the body, causing the microbes to have to come and clean up the waste. So it's very important to have your lymphatic system running very, very well. Now, your blood system is pumped from your heart, your arterial system goes away from the heart, and your venous system comes back. Now, around your circulatory system, there's a muscular coating. So when the heart pumps, these muscles are going all the way down. And when you exercise, you increase that heart rate. That's why exercise is so good at strengthening the heart. But your lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. And it doesn't have a muscular system around it. And it's got something else too. It has all these little valves all through the lymphatic system, all through those little canals. There's little gates. And when you're sitting still, they're just closed. And when you wake up in the morning, they're just closed. But when you rebound, it's the most powerful way to open them. Just movement of arms and legs does activate somewhat your lymphatic system. But when you're jumping on that trampoline, when you're up in the air, at that split second that you're weightless, every gate opens. And then when you hit the mat, every gate closes. And then when you jump up in the air again, every gate opens. And when you hit the mat, every gate closes. Can you see the pumping system that happens? No wonder children jump all the time. Watch how children breathe. They breathe with their abdominal muscles. Watch how they run. They run on their toes. Watch what they do half the day. Jump! If you want to have their energy, you've got to do what they do. So if someone has swelling in the ankles, swelling in the legs, pulmonary edema, what should they do? Rebound. Rebound. Now you need to get a good one. No $50 job, okay? And the best rebounder is the knee duck. So you will pay probably about $500 for that. You can go even better than that, and I think you can get up to $1,000 ones, and they have rubber instead of springs. But that's a very good one. That's the one that we have, knee duck. You can get a cheap and nasty one, and that might last you 6 months and then break, and maybe half break your back in the process. So you've got to go for a very good one to ensure that you're getting a full effect out of your rebounder. Rain, hail or shine, you can do it. Mothers with children, you can do it. So there's actually no excuse not to do it. Except the $500. Well, what I'd like you to do is do an assessment of what you spend your money on. Okay? When you stop the coffee and the wine and the cigarettes and the meat, oh, you'll save a fortune. Lentils are so cheap, and when you soak them, you got double. Nuts are expensive, but remember, you only need 8. So when you have a look at it like that, yes, you'll have plenty of money to be able to start a little knee duck fund, especially when you realise what a powerful form of exercise it is. In fact, Albert Carter says 5 minutes 3 times a day. That's nothing. Or you can do it all at once in your high intensity interval training. With the high intensity, you might find your recovery time could be just walking around the room and then go back onto it. And then recovery time walking around the room or back onto it. Have some water. Albert Carter has written a whole book on how it increases eyesight. Everyone's interested in that. Now what you do, it's very, very simple, is when you're jumping, and I do it all the time, you've got different things you can focus on. Now, if I was jumping here in this room, I would find something that I could focus on, and as I focused on that and I jump, everything around it jumps. So I'll tell you what I do at my house. I've trained a rose so that at my kitchen sink I can look at my roses to come up. So there's a rose coming up just in my kitchen window. In my lounge room I'm looking out through my kitchen. So when I'm rebounding, I focus on the rose, and the pine trees out on the edge of our property are jumping like this. And then I'll change my focus. In fact, every 10 jumps, I change my focus. And then I'll focus on a branch of the pine tree, and the rose starts jumping in my peripheral vision. And then I'll change to a cow in the paddock across the road. And then the pine tree and the rose start jumping up. You just keep changing. So if you're rebounding for that amount of time, for 15 minutes a day, can you imagine the eye exercises that your eyes are getting? Try not to use glasses. If you can't read something, go to the sunshine. Get a little light and use, I have some magnifying glasses that I hardly ever use. I use them only if I have to. So keep those eyes strong. Eyes need you to be well hydrated. Eyes need you to be sleeping at night. The worst thing for your eyes is exposure to technology. In those hours when we should be sleeping, you know when we should be sleeping? Between the hours of 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. That's when we should be asleep. Yes, this week it's going to be more like 9:30, but it's only a few more days. There's only one more day after tonight. That's what weakens eyes. Eye strain, when you're not tired, strengthens your eyes. Eye strain, when you're tired, weakens your eyes. So look after your eyes. And eyes love sun, especially the early morning sun. That early morning sun resets the circadian rhythm in your brain, which is the rhythm that your brain runs at. And Dr. Neil Nedley, in his book Depression: A Way Out, he found that 80% of his depressed patients, their circadian rhythm was out of balance. How does our circadian rhythm get out of balance? By going to bed too late, by allowing your eyes to have exposure to technology when it actually should be asleep. If you can't sleep, get a little head torch and a book. But don't put that technology on, because then there's no way you'll have sleep at all then.
You mean TV?
I mean TV, I mean iPad, I mean iPhone, I mean computer, all that technology. And there's really no excuse now, because if there is a show on late that you really want to watch, you can watch it the next day on iView, you can record it. There's so many things that you can do. And let's say someone's got a bit of study to do because they've got some exams coming up. Well, go to bed at 8 o'clock and get up at 4 o'clock. Because not a problem if your eyes have exposure to technology at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, I married a night owl. When I married Michael 20 years ago, he had 2 little children, and he used to put them to bed and then go to the office till 1 o'clock in the morning. So when we married, I said, I have claims on you now of an evening. Every now and then he'd say, look, I just got to do it. I'm behind. No one rings me at midnight. Well, I never nagged because it never does any good. Did you hear that, ladies? Do you know he never does it now? Because he discovered no one rings you at 5 a.m. either. And if he went to bed at 1 o'clock, his next day was a wipeout. But when you go to bed early and you get those hours of power, it's easy to wake up. It's easy to do your exercise. And isn't that the one thing most people miss out when they're in a rush? And it's actually the one thing they need, because that's what will give the energy through the day. In the book Pace, Progressive Acceleration of Cardiopulmonary Exertion, Dr. Al says, he shows that exercise is progressive. What you can't do now, you will be able to do. Maybe at the moment when you get your knee done, you can only do this. You can only do the jig, but it won't be long before you're jumping and your arms are out and your body can get very strong. It's progressive acceleration. This is Pace, Dr. Al Sear's book. Acceleration, you are moving. This is no gentle stroll. Can't run, exercise bike. Can't exercise bike, swim. Can't swim, rebound. Everyone can rebound, and if you can't quite get to that speed, if you do it every day, you will get there. Remember, this is progressive, and remember, muscle knows no age. Whether you're 9 or 90, this is applicable. So progressive acceleration. C is cardiopulmonary. What's cardio? It's heart. Our exercise coordinator at Misty Mountain Health Retreat, his name is Howard. He's worked with us for, I think, 16 years now. And our guests think he's 38 and he's 54. He is very, very fit. And we've lived and worked with him for 16 years. He's always the same. He's married with a couple of children. And his resting heart rate is 46 beats per minute. You know, it's not genetics. The more you use that heart muscle, the stronger it gets, and the less it has to beat. And it is said we only have so many beats in a lifetime. So the lower your heart rate, what does that mean? I wouldn't be surprised if Howard's still our exercise coordinator when he's 80. Now he gets up at 5 to wake our guests at 6, and he takes them on an exercise program, and he often comes home and goes home and does another exercise with his wife, and then has breakfast and comes back to the health centre and massages all morning, and then he does a Pilates class with the guests, and then in the afternoon he does the steam bath, and he chops the wood for the steam bath because our steam bath is down by the creek. So our guests have a hot steam, dive into the mountain stream, back into the hot steam. Do you know what he does for fun? All about 3 days a week after work. And what time would he get home? He'd get home about 6:30. What does he do for fun? Well, he puts his bicycle in the back of his car, drives about 10 k's to get to the tar, and then goes on a 40k bike ride. That's for fun. And this guy bounces around the place. He has so much energy. Where does he get his energy? Remember, you will receive more energy than you expend when you exercise. So Howard's heart rate is 46 beats per minute. Let me tell you a story about my son Peter. My son Peter's a Tyler. He lives in Brisbane. And when he was a young Tyler, just getting himself known, he was dismantling an old vanity unit. You know, the old 50s tile, those big bowls on a stand. And it had a big, it wasn't a crack, but a big chip out of it. And he was holding it, getting it off, and it slipped. And it hit his ankle. And I think if he hadn't had a bone there, he would have lost his foot. And the blood hit the roof. Now Peter, he was training for a triathlon. He was running up and down. He was 25 at the time. He was running up and down. He's 33 now, I think. But he was running up and down the hills in the back of Brisbane, training for his triathlon. Running up and down hills, that's good interval training. And Peter's resting heart rate was 50 beats per minute. So when that artery was cut, the blood hit the roof. Now my son James, who's a few years older, was outside, and Pete said, "James, quick!" And apparently James said, "I'm on the phone, mate." I tell you this to let you know it was a couple of minutes before James got in there. Peter must have just said, "Help," or something like that. James ran in, and James said to me, the blood was sprinkled all over the roof, all over the walls. This is a resting heart rate of 50 beats per minute. It is so strong, so powerful, that when it pumps in a powerful way. Now, if Peter's resting heart rate was, let's say, 75 beats per minute, the blood would have only gone, boop, maybe up to about here. So the stronger the heart, the less it has to pump, and the more powerful is the pump, which means the greater the rest after every pump. Anyway, they bandaged him up, took him to hospital, had a few layers of stitches, and the nurse kept taking his pulse. She couldn't believe it, 50 beats per minute. And you heal quickly, as you do when your body's working well. See, that's not genetics. The stronger you get, the stronger your heart muscle gets, the less it has to beat, and the more powerful is every thrust. So Dr. Al Steer's book, PACE, Progressive Acceleration Cardiopulmonary. Pulmonary is lungs. The Framingham Heart Study. I mentioned the Framingham Heart Study the other night because it was a study that was set up in America, a little town of Framingham. Been going for 30 years, 30,000 people. They did it to prove that cholesterol and saturated fat cause heart disease, but it actually hasn't proven that. That's the study that proved that people with high cholesterol levels don't get Alzheimer's. Interesting piece of information. But in that study, they found that by the age of 50, people had lost 40% lung capacity. By the age of 80, they'd lost 60% lung capacity. Why? Because they don't exercise. They don't get to the point where they're going to feel like you're dying. That's the sort of breathing we should get to. It's that sort of breathing that will prevent loss of lung capacity. And if you have lost lung capacity, high-intensity interval training causing those lungs to breathe at such an extreme rate, you will regain lung capacity. Isn't that good? So, pace, progressive, acceleration of cardiopulmonary exertion. You are exerting yourself. This is no gentle stroll. This is running for your life, swimming for your life, rebounding. When I got off my son's rebounder this morning, and yes, he got the biggest and the best, it's the $1,000 job. You're breathing like this. That's what you've got to get to. Most people over the age of 50 get scared of that. No, that's the sort of exercise that's going to save you. That's the sort of exercise that's going to prevent loss of lung capacity. By the way, when you have lost lung capacity, say you've lost 40% lung capacity, let's take it to the cellular level. Does that mean that 40% of the cells are running at 2 units of energy instead of 36 units of energy? Can you see the ramifications of that? You can imagine what's happening in the brain when it hasn't got that oxygen. And some people call it depression. Oh no! When all it is lack of oxygen. And exercise is the most powerful way to increase the oxygen levels in your blood. Let me show you something else. This is the cell, and I just drew the energy cycle in the cell as if there was one, but there's not. There's hundreds of those little energy cycle in every cell. And if you do high intensity interval training, your cell will develop more. What does that mean? More energy. How many people you know are looking for more energy? Something else happens with the high intensity interval training. Because that cell is crying out for more fuel, more glucose, it actually develops extra insulin receptor sites. You've heard of insulin resistance? On the high carbohydrate diet, overworking poor old pancreas, and continually sending heaps of glucose there, and the cell I'm sick of the sight of you. So the cell develops insulin resistance. Insulin resistance can be turned around in a matter of a week or two. Isn't that good news? How do you turn it around? Low carbohydrate, no wheat. Because that wheat gets the blood sugar level up higher than even sugar. That's the hybridized wheat. The high intensity interval training, which helps the cell to develop more insulin receptor sites, because these little energy cycles are going, we need more, we need more. What's insulin resistant? I'm sick of the sight of you. Can you see how you can turn that around? And to top all of that off, your brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the protein that stimulates the release or the creation of new brain cells. Oh, it doesn't get better than that, does it? There are 3 shockers that shock the body into producing more brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that is high-intensity interval training. I'm warning you. And I know you can hardly wait to get home so that you can wake up in the morning and do it. I can tell. I can just tell by the look on your faces. And it's a pity you have to go to sleep tonight because you're so wanting to give it a go. So 3 shockers. One is the high intensity interval training. The other one is finishing every hot shower with a quick cold. Now the good news is it's still pretty warm in Brisbane, and so it's not going to be too hard. So start doing it now in preparation for the cooler months. You will not need a few injections. The body's designed to heal itself. It doesn't need that. Finishing every hot shower is one of your best preventions. The third shocker is fasting. When you eat breakfast like a king and lunch like a queen, there's no need to eat an evening meal. So you can have an 18-hour fast every 24 hours. Isn't that good news? Maybe you'll choose one day a week where you'll have a fast. But to me, the easiest is having breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen. Have your main meal at 1:30, and that'll take you through, and then breakfast the next day. They're the 3 shockers that'll cause a release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which stimulates the creation of new brain cells. Before we close, are there any questions? Yes?
Well, what happens to people when they drink energy drinks?
What happens to people when they drink energy drinks? It takes their energy away. Because you know what it does? It gives a quick high and then a corresponding low. And on Saturday morning, I'll be looking at what caffeine does to the body. And what caffeine does is it interferes with the neurotransmitters in the brain. It actually tricks the body into thinking there's a crisis. And when there's a crisis, you get a rush of energy. And people think, oh, this is nice. But you wouldn't think that if you saw a tiger on the path, would you?
What about coffee?
What about coffee? Same thing. It's all caffeine. Caffeine. Yeah?
I've got osteopenia through the use of steroids, killer steroids, for about 10 years. Would rebounding be the best exercise?
Yes, rebounding was the best thing to recover from steroid use, absolutely. In fact, every single organ in the body. Do you know what, when you start to do this, your bowels work better, your pancreas works better, your adrenal glands work better, your brain starts to work better, your kidneys start to work better. There's not an organ in the body that's not boosted by doing this, because every single cell in the body is activated. Yes?
Cardiotech Life Back 2 machine, that vibrating, the really good vibrating.
Yeah.
Does that do the same?
The really good vibrating machine, does that do that? Nothing like it. It's defying gravity. And when you're getting shaky, you don't defy gravity at all. But when you're leaping off the planet, that's the only way to defy gravity. Yes?
Can you buy the rebounders locally?
Can you buy the rebounders locally? My husband, Michael, up the back, he's the one that bought our rebounders, but he said that they are American, but there's an Australian distributor. It's not listening. Yeah?
I'm just wondering, surely with the cheaper ones you still get all the same?
Surely with the cheaper ones, you know, when I said to Michael I want a rebounder, he got me a $69 job, one from the local shop, and I'm only 50 kilos, so it wasn't a big deal. But when I read about the power of the rebounder regarding knee duct, I got my knee duct. What a difference. It's like night and day. On the rebounder, it basically accelerates you up. In fact, the cheap ones were almost like jumping on the ground. They're so hard. So I got away with it because I'm only 50 kilo, but any more weight than me, and I don't think the person would get away with it. Yes?
In New Zealand, we eat a lot of seafood, sea urchins, abalone, fish, twice kind of shellfish stuff. Do you reckon it's good to like eat that kind of food as part of the diet regularly, or just now and then?
Well, what you've got to remember with the shellfish is they're the vacuum cleaners of the sea. And there's hardly a part of the sea today that is not polluted. And so they, as the vacuum cleaners, are actually going to be pretty high in the pollution. And in many islands today, people are coming down with neurological problems because of the atomic testing that's been done in the sea and is affecting the fish. And in some places, you can't even eat the fish. If you look at the most recent studies of the fishery department on the levels of dioxins and mercuries in fish, it's not a very pretty story. So I think that when the planet was not polluted, I think, you know, traditionally, a couple of 100 years ago, those islands used a lot of seafood. But you know, it must have been over 100 years ago, especially in Fiji, a lot of Indians were brought to the island to man the sugarcane fields. So when I'm in Fiji, I say, traditionally you people ate fish, but God has used all these Indian people coming to your island to teach you a better and purer form of protein, which is your legumes, your beans. It's just finding out how to cook them. If you don't know how to cook them, get an Indian cookbook or a Lebanese cookbook. They know how to cook legumes. So unfortunately, because of the pollution on the planet, seafood is not really a good food anymore. Now there's a couple of questions here. Oh, when is it best to exercise? We already know that. Early morning is the best. Now if you have to be at work by 4 o'clock in the morning and you can't exercise in the morning, I'm sure if you start work at 4, you probably finish 2 or 3 and do it then. Just before bed's not good because you'll be so waked up, you're ready for the day and you're about to go to sleep. So ideally in the morning, if not, middle of the day, early afternoon is the best time to exercise. Is having a physical job counted as exercise? It depends whether you get up to high intensity interval training, to that sort of level of extreme. I think if you're a gardener and you're hoeing a garden bed, you're doing high intensity interval training. Well, I didn't ever think I needed to exercise because I'm running all day, I'm doing this, doing a bit of gardening, and then I stayed with a friend about 15 years ago in New Zealand, and she's 10 years younger than me, twice my size, and she said, Barbara, I do a 5-hour walk every morning, would you like to join me? I said, yeah, because I didn't have to get the children out of bed and cook the breakfast and put the wash on, all that sort of stuff. After 2 kilometres, I could not keep up with her. It's very embarrassing. She's twice my weight. I'm the health teacher. The next morning when I woke up, I could hardly move. My muscles were so sore. You know, that experience taught me that I have to take a little spot every morning to exercise. So unless you're doing severe or intense, I should say, physical activity in your work, I'd probably suggest no, being busy all day long, physical all day long, is not equal to exercise. Yes?
Any problems with GM foods?
Any problems with genetically modified foods? Lots. On Tuesday night I talked about this a little bit. When you eat genetically modified foods, the molecules broken down from that can interfere with our DNA. And it is true that genetically modified foods cause cancer. Unfortunately, they don't have to state if foods are genetically modified. That's why you're safest going organic. Go as organic as much as possible. Thank you for your attention tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow night I'm going to be talking on how you can empower your immune system. Great meeting to know about as we go into the winter months, with all the scare campaigns on the media that everyone has to have a flu injection or they're going to die. So I look forward to seeing you.
Is that necessary?
It's not necessary at all. No. Especially when you realise that last winter 70,000 people were admitted to hospital with the flu, and never have Australians been so vaccinated against the flu. The vaccines are actually bringing in new strains. So no, we do not need to vaccinate.
But it needs to finish its 4 showers at home.
You'll find out tomorrow.